Greetings, one and all, dear friends, complete strangers alike. I'm Mercury Black, co-host here. And on tonight's Random Lunatic Live, we will be addressing the question, are we all going to die? I have two answers for that. The short answer is yes. And the long answer is yes, of course we fucking are. Don't worry, nothing has changed whatsoever. Nobody's being turned into an immortal. We could all die at any time still for a wide variety of reasons. So don't worry, nothing's changed about the fabric of reality. We are all going to die. And if you're thinking, okay, at a time like this, that's misleading. Obviously, we don't mean it that way. But if your response to the answer is that, then I would say that's a sign that you really haven't deeply accepted and integrated the first answer. Okay, it's like I've said a number of times about, like if somebody's talking about a breakup, if somebody's recently had a breakup, I will often point out that that's the opportunity to learn to be okay on your own. And that learning how to be fulfilled in yourself without relying on another partner, instead of just running to the next relationship. It's like if you just run to the next relationship, you're avoiding your fear of being alone. And you're avoiding learning the skills of how to be okay on your own. And that will put a pressure on every relationship you have. And you're always going to carry that fear with you. So, because a lot of people lately are saying things like seize the opportunity in the crisis. And a lot of people think that sounds good, but is bullshit. How do you do it? And so like with a breakup, you can seize that as an opportunity to learn to be okay with yourself while you're single and to be prepared for the next relationship properly. And that way, when a relationship, if you've already done that, when a relationship falls apart, you still feel heartbroken and you mourn the loss of that person, especially if you're not the one doing the breakup. But if you haven't learned to be alone, you're facing the breakup and you're facing the fact that you're not okay on your own at the same time. So it's the same thing when it comes to moments of crisis or soldiers on a battlefield. I think perhaps some of you watching, and hi Grizz, hi Daniel, I'll check things in the chat in a minute. I just want to see how many of my thoughts on the issue of death in general I can get out here. Where was I? Okay, so some people are very comfortable with the idea and have integrated it because they've spent significant time suicidal. That's one way. Also, like Peterson has said that in his like deep meditations, he's gotten intimations that death is a good thing. I'm not talking about even just accepting the tragedy of death, which there's that element to it, which the Stoics and Seneca, if you want to look into the advantages of meditating on losing our loved ones, the advantages of meditating on the worst possible outcome. Like look into Stoicism and Seneca. But also, there is a beauty to death. Death and life are the same thing. There's this wonderful pattern going on, the yin and the yang, and that can be connected to. Knowing that you're going to die and like really feeling it deeply is also a relief. I would genuinely be worried if some sort of weird new sci-fi pandemic happened where it was a positive virus. That if instead of weakening the body in any way, it turned you immortal, just stopped aging, amped everything up, and turned you into like Wolverine with no way to die. That I would find terrifying. And I think like, I know some of you watch or that might see this, some of our community are former soldiers. And you can see how when a soldier's on a battlefield, it's like the ones that have accepted that they will die. They are just on that battlefield. Whereas if you were to find yourself on a battlefield and you're not okay with the fact that you're going to die, if you spend your life avoiding that thought, then at the moment of the firefight, You're dealing with both the dangerous situation and your panic at the idea of your death. And so, what's going on right now? Anytime you hit a fucking crisis, that's a wonderful opportunity to examine what you have in yourself not dealt with. If there's a stress in your relationship and you're really upset, examine it. Is part of the reason you're so upset? Because aside even from that person that you want to be with, are you not okay alone? If you're having a really strong reaction to what's going on now and you're incredibly fearful and you realize that this is making you think about the fact that you're going to die, like not just that you might die of this or you might lose certain loved ones at this time, but also if you realize like, fuck, I have really been avoiding that. To examine, are you okay with the fact that you're going to die? And are you okay with the fact that everyone you love is going to die? And what are the advantages of that? You might wonder if everything I'm saying is completely foreign to you as a way of looking at things. What could you learn from your worries right now? Well, if you're worried about loved ones, examine, who am I worried about? Who does it just terrify me to think of them dying of this? And realize how much you value them. And have you been taking the time to spend as much time with them as you can? Or to be present with them when you're there? Are you always thinking about what happened earlier, what might happen later, and never about the time you're spending with a child that you adore, or a spouse, or, family, friends? Are you always off somewhere else, not appreciating the time you've had with them? How many people, if they weren't here tomorrow, would you be like, fuck, I wish I'd paid more attention? And also, it's an opportunity to let those people know, hey, mom, dad, I've thought about it. And if you guys got this and I lost you, that's heartbreaking. Oh, and for, because there's a lot of people talking about conspiracies and apocalypse themed stuff. So aside from on the personal level, that this is an opportunity to examine that we are all going to die. And again, you can look at it because we can look at everything in life as this is being done to me and this is bad, or this is being done for me and it's good. And you get different answers based on what you ask. So ask, in meditation, ask God or your higher self or whatever you do, to ask, okay, why should I be okay with death? Why is death done something? Why is that something done for me? And why is that good? And I'm not even aiming to try to outline how to do any of this right now. I just think there might be some people that don't even realize it's possible. So I'm just going to say that I am fine with the theoretical fact that I'm going to die and everyone else is going to die. Also, I've gone through psychosis a number of times involving the end of the world. And phenomenologically, I've already been through apocalypses. And as somebody who's bipolar, I experience extremely dramatic and extreme shit just on its own without the world falling apart, to the point that I'll have a psychotic delusion that the world is actually falling apart. I've been through this enough times, and I've been through states of, because you can be both afraid of the rapture, or the other polarity, one polarity is I'm terrified of the end of the world. The other polarity is I can't wait for the end of the world. Whether you're a Christian looking forward to the, after the final judgment and God's kingdom come, or any other number of cults or philosophies that just like death, fractally out on different scales and at different aspects of reality, ends are ultimately good. So perhaps when apocalypse comes, if it ever does, it will be a good thing. Aside from that, I agree with Jonathan Pageau when he says that mythology happens, and mythology and the archetypes, these are real things. To have the experience of an apocalypse, or to connect to that archetypal aspect of our psychology, or perhaps to connect to the metaphysical energy of apocalypse, is possible at any time. And I went through repeated delusions about the end of the world. And ultimately, having gone through it a number of times and then learning to manage my insanity in a more shamanic way and understanding the angelic realm more clearly once I got in better terms with my archangel, had a better way to communicate established. I asked about that. Like, look, I've been through this a couple times. Was that just a delusion, or is the end of the world coming? And the answer I got from the angel is, that doesn't matter. What matters is that you went through the end of the world. It was real for you. And so if you're worried about the end of the world, again, there's an opportunity, because ultimately there, and when we're afraid of death, we can avoid the question of whether or not there's something after death. But I think something that comes into a lot of apocalyptic thinking is also that there, especially like if it's some sort of revelation type thing, you've got the added element of facing fearing your creator. And facing fearing your creator is different than facing death. Those are two different things. And examine that. Why the fuck are you afraid to meet your creator? And you'll realize that things just arise. And you'll realize that you're doing things you know full well you shouldn't be doing. This, if you're very worried about conspiracies in the end of the world right now, that's an opportunity to hear more clearly from yourself all the things that you should have changed already. And so, like, I think a wise answer to the question, is the apocalypse coming? It doesn't fucking matter. Behave as though it is. Because for you personally, this world could end at any fucking moment. And that is the unmaking of this entire reality as far as you're concerned. And if there is anything after this, and we do face some sort of judgment, whatever that means, then for all intents and purposes, yes, you have an apocalypse ahead of you. Yes, this entire world will be ripped away from you, and you will face judgment or karma or whatever it is that comes next. So this could be an opportunity to face that realistically and change the things you know you need to change, so that eventually you don't fear facing your creator anymore. Because I really don't anymore. And it's not because I feel I'm perfect or anything, and that I don't have any correcting coming in the afterlife. But I'm living authentically. I'm living genuinely to the best of my ability. And I trust that whatever encounters or judgment I face, like, I'm going to fucking listen and take corrective action. And that itself, again, judgment won't be done to me. It will be done for me to correct me. And I think the idea of the judge of God, the idea of karma, these things are fingers, not the moon. These are direction, like pointing at the metaphysical thing that happens. And to me, because we often think of that as, I'll face judgment and then that determines where I end up going. It's sort of that kind of judgment often, or what I get done to me. But from my experience of consciousness, the bigger judgment that you receive for your past actions isn't where you end up and what's done to you. It's what that made you become. If you could only have control over two things, where you end up, or one of two things, where you end up or what you're going to become, personally, I would choose to have control over what I'm going to become. We're always facing the fucking judgment of what we've done before. It shaped what we are, and it shapes our entire experience. So when these things come up, especially if anyone's really down a rabbit hole in conspiracies, what does that tell you about yourself? And on the plus side, what the fuck are any of us going to do about any of those conspiracies anyway? I still think it comes down to, it can be a good idea always to examine your life and first of all, perhaps what we need is to examine our fucking, like, to be less caught up in planning everything and worrying about the future. Maybe a lot of us need to enjoy our now more and experience what we're doing. But when it is time to be thinking about the future, especially if you need to plan your behavior, if you're not happy with the way things are now, you realize you need to change them. A good way to do that is to imagine your future two ways. One is to imagine that you found out for certain you were going to die in 2 years. Or even better, like imagine the whole world was going to die, like be destroyed in 2 years. Scientists just found out there's a meteor coming. What would you do with the last 2 years? That's a good thing to contemplate. Then contemplate, what would you do if you found out you were going to live to 110? If you went to the doctor and they informed you that you had an incredibly rare gene, excellent, and that you were like a mild version again of Wolverine. If you found out for sure you were going to live till 110, then how would you plan your life? And if there are things that are in both plans, then maybe those are good things to do. I'm feeling pretty flighty mentally. I'm having mixed states today and yesterday, which I don't often have. I'm having aspects of mania and aspects of depression. So I kind of just lost track of everything I said. It seems like I talked for over 15 minutes, though, and I think all of that was addressing the title of this. So did I? Okay, Grizz, Daniel, and Dust to Dust. Hey, good to see you. Did I address the topic properly, or did I start something that I didn't finish there? By the way, I think maybe that was enough said about are we all going to die? Short answer, yes. Long answer, yes. Of course we fucking are. That's enough of an answer on that anyway. Daniel says, awareness of our own mortality is a part of human condition. It's mainly a taboo in the Western world. Yeah, and that's not true of all times and places. There's plenty of places where dead bodies aren't hidden away. And also, I guess it's worse for people in the city. And again, we always, or at least I notice, that if I don't think about it, I tend to assume others are like me. So, if you see in color, you just assume everyone else sees in color unless they say otherwise. So I grew up with a lot of time spent like in nature and around farms. I didn't always grow up, I wasn't always living on farms growing up, but it was always rural areas or farms. And I visited my, grandparents a lot on a farm. And in the Western world, that's one place where death isn't as swept away, because you just can't fucking sweep away death doing agriculture. Like with a kid. And also, I never had the moment that some people had of, oh my God, chicken is chicken, meat is eating animals. Like, to me, I always knew that. I always knew that's what farms were for. So in the Western world, we have a tendency to hide away our dead. And then we even try to pretend they're not dead. We embalm them and put makeup on everything. So the last time you see it, and it's not done well. Obviously, a dead person looks dead. But if we had the skills to, we would just freeze them still looking alive. That's, almost like trying to pretend that they're not really dead. But that's not everywhere. I remember last summer, found a dead raccoon in the backyard, and I left it somewhere to rot. And it swelled up and it filled with maggots, and all kinds of actually animals or insects came out of that fucking thing. Beetles laid eggs and everything. But I left that at a spot in the backyard and showed my little kids how it was going. And young children are fascinated by insects and whatnot. And even though there was a ooh and it stank and whatnot, they found that interesting. But I'm not a big fan of hiding away death from everyone. Daniel says, according to the Holy Bible, the end of the world will come. And parts of me do believe that there is an apocalypse, and parts exactly that's in some way that's going to come about. And other parts of me are more atheist. But I am to the point where, I'm not worried about it. even just regular human life, the range of possibilities, all of heaven and hell is laid out before us at the moment anyway. And with the extremes, like the way I experience life is so dramatic and extreme anyway, that I'm fairly depolarized to whether or not it happens. And Dust to Dust says God is pretty frightening. Yeah, I remember feeling that way, but especially with my near-death experience and the connections I felt to God in various states, my angels and everything, I feel like I know God. And I'm aware that like these things might be just fucking delusions, all of it. There may be no afterlife whatsoever. Maybe our consciousness itself is nothing. It's just an illusion that I am experiencing awareness at all. That could be true. But if I'm going to be honest about what I do experience, especially with the strange combination of insanity and mystical practices, I don't believe in angels and God because I read it anywhere or because it makes sense. I believe in it because I experienced it. Hey, Gloff, good to see you. Oh, and Grizz says, I think if we chat, it lights his face up. This is testing that. No, the reason I get dark and bright is I'm listening to quiet music on my PS3. I've got a CD playing, and this is the background of my TV over there. There's just shifting colorful patterns while it plays the CD. So that's the way the reason the lighting keeps changing. And Daniel says, I think God is beyond good and evil. Yeah, absolutely. God is something ultimately transcendent and beyond our ability to comprehend. And I don't feel like I understand God properly. I experience something and I don't know what. And also, that's one reason I don't have the same criticism of Peterson a lot of people do of the way he reacts to the question, do you believe in God? Because I have no problem saying I believe in God because I don't know what the fuck God is exactly. I've encountered aspects of it, but I don't know how much this is like 6 blind men touching an elephant in the dark. I don't know if I'm just touching a tail or an ear or what. And I don't delude myself that, okay, so even if God's real, even if my angel's real, even if I'm really connecting to actual things, I don't delude myself that that means I interpret it all correctly. And Dust to Dust says, I usually run into passages of assurance in scripture when I get paranoid or frightened. Yeah, that happens to me too. I don't get the feeling. Okay, fuck. I don't want to be judgmental of other, spiritual teachers or gurus or whatnot, but there's been a wide variety of people who seem to connect to the apocalyptic archetype. And from my experience of it, that aspect of panic and urgency and that there's something bad coming that needs to be avoided. In my experience, that's an initial lesson. That's something to encounter and have your reaction to. And then to see that if any of this shit is real, it's a good thing. And it's not something that you should be panicking about. It's not something you should be forcing onto other people. I find at initial levels of insanity or enlightenment, there's the sort of go out and prophesize, go force it on people. seems to me that's something that happens at the surface level. And that's more about what you need to be exploring yourself and getting caught up in the outcome for the world or getting caught up in saving others is a way of misinterpreting the message and not applying it to yourself because you're worried about everyone else who's behind you instead of worried about where you need to move forward. If that makes any sense. It says it was weird. You just said, yes, we are, and shivered for 12 minutes. Oh, that was your daydream version. The Western notion of we will never die. Exactly, Gloff. And again, I'm not saying, and I'm also not saying that there's not a value to that statement. There's something about polarizing yourself and experiencing an extreme that is out of balance with the universe. I think there's a balance to that. Like the idea that you ride the border between chaos and order, you know, the yin and yang. It's not that that's because it's a bad thing to go into each entirely. I think there's something about metaphysically about life that the way to master reality is to experience each extreme first. Then it's easiest to polarize yourself in such a way that you're balanced and in the middle. And then also if you find that you can go into one mode and realize you can survive it, you can be mindful through it, you can treat it as an opportunity for self-development and progress right out of it. Then you experience the opposite end. And if you find you can do that, that's when you stop worrying about the outcome. Because you're like, okay, well, if it is the end of the world, I sort of have a feel for how to play that out. And I know I'll live out my role in this story to the best of my ability. And then the same thing with if it doesn't happen, because you can also get fixated on that the only thing worth living in is the next world after the apocalypse. And so you don't appreciate what there is about the world the way it is now, because you're always looking forward to ushering in the golden age. So there's a value of being in that I will never die, go fucking conquer the world mode. That mode has something to teach us, but it's an extreme. And I think right now, if people are only good at functioning in that mode, that they might be feeling some trepidation about the future. So it's good to go the opposite direction and become good with, we will absolutely die. Also, you learn a lot about getting, like if you get caught up in anything, a cult, a rabbit hole, some sort of ideology or anything, if you can get caught up in that, actually fully enter that world and then exit it, I think that's really valuable to consciousness. And especially if you can learn properly from each different identity you take on as you experiment with different ways of being. Especially if you have the mindfulness to realize that each of these egos, each of these personalities, each of these identities are a mask. And you kind of, in a way, psychologically build up a series of masks that your consciousness can wear if it chooses to. And you can put on the mask of depression and look through those eyes without getting caught up in it at a certain point. You can learn how to inhabit a personality without being absorbed by the personality. And you can see the way your basic conscious awareness steps into different ways of being, different sub-personalities, different... fuck. I give up on that train of thought. Grizz says, I attended an autopsy and immediately understood what spark of life means. Yeah, that's one thing I would love to do. I would love to go to the local funeral house, like in theory, aside from my social anxiety and the fact that I never leave my house. So like a daydream I have about if I was more socially active would be to volunteer at the local like funeral home and assist in autopsies just for the chance to really meditate on death and also like to assist with something, to be a part of the process. As a little kid, I loved finding roadkill and examining it, or dead animals in the woods and seeing what they were made of. And I know that's like serial killer behavior to be fascinated with that. That's one of the signs, but I didn't wet the bed like past a normal age. I didn't start fires, and I never killed animals. I never hurt animals. I was always very nice to pets and whatnot. But yeah, when I found dead animals, I loved examining them. I remember when I was a kid, sometimes I would just like ride my bike around the back roads, the dirt roads, just sort of for the fun of going for a bike ride, but also sometimes on the lookout for a dead animal to examine. Gloff says, I think about death just once a day. Yeah, I do too. Especially like during my depressed periods. I often allow myself to fantasize about death as a way of allowing the depressed part of me and, accepting the suicidal part of me. So I will often, like the way you daydream something you could do, daydream about killing myself when I'm really, feeling that suicidal and needing to allow it. Hey, Shane. And Shane says Jesus came back on the third day. If that's not reincarnation, I don't know what is. Yeah. And when it comes to reincarnation, I'm not worried about it anymore. I spent a lot of time examining the ideas of reincarnation or of just continuing experience in the afterlife. And I've decided that I really don't give a shit which of those is happening, because I sense a pattern of life and death again, where death is not the end. It's a transition to another stage. And whether that other stage is an incarnation in another physical body here, or whether that's having different experiences on different levels of reality, moving up layers of heaven or purgatories, or experiencing different dimensions where what we think of as physical is something entirely different. To me, none of that matters. It's about learning the pattern of the game, regardless of what it means to continue or what it means to reincarnate. Because I do sense there's more to continue beyond this body. And so I'm not that concerned whether it's into another body or another dimension. To me, the implications are just so similar when it comes to thinking about how you should act morally and such. Daniel says, I saw a few autopsies on YouTube. It brings a lot of questions, but clearly the human body cannot be the fruit of blind and random evolution. I agree with that, although I don't deny that evolution as science explains it. To me, it just seems like this entire universe is designed for intelligence to develop it. So all evolution, along like the way it occurs, is a part of the physics of this reality, just like all of the gravity and light speed and everything that was put into this reality is so we can grow. And to me, that would allow that science is something real. And in fact, if all of reality is the word of God, then doing science is just learning to understand the word of God. And so understanding the laws built into reality around us and understanding the evolutionary process that organic life involves. It seems to me like all of that is designed as a system. And it doesn't even necessarily require God constantly being active. It's like the way we bake something. You take all the ingredients, you mix them, you set a temperature, you set a time. And so once you've placed it in, the cake just rises, or the bread, like it transforms and develops into something. And it's like if you only existed inside the oven, you'd be like, okay, there's some sort of natural progress where bread just grows and develops and becomes this. And no, it doesn't require that the baker actively is involved inside the oven at all. That process can be set up to run in a way that it is still by design. And you would still say the baker caused that to happen. Do I feel like God wants to be known? Yes, but I don't feel like God wants us to go out and force him on anyone. God wants to be discovered on his own, or her own, or its own, or however you experience God. And the funny thing is you experience God, you're like, oh, okay, everyone is experiencing God all the time. Also, they're just not realizing it. And yes, there's layers of it. So for instance, if you're just touching an elephant's tail, there's still the ears and the nose about the elephant to discover. But we're like, God is known. Like, do you know? Well, unless I'm wrong about all this and you're not having a conscious experience. But if you're aware that reality's going on, and if that hermetic idea of all exists within the mind of God, then you're fully aware of God. You can't be aware of anything but God. Enlightenment isn't beginning to perceive God. It's being aware that you've already been perceiving nothing but God. And then examining, exploring further. And Shane says, 6 blind men touching an elephant, one of them will be clinging to dogma. Well, yeah, that's just it. If as you're holding the tail, you want to argue that you're right. If that's the game you're playing, is I want to show that I'm cooler than everyone else and that I understand what an elephant is and they're idiots. And you're going to hold on to that tail and argue for nothing but an elephant is a rope. If on the other hand, the game you're playing is, hey, we all experience things differently. None of us are fucking right. This isn't a competition. I don't want to delude myself that I'm correct. I would rather be aware that I don't know and continue to examine and explore. Oh, I'm fucking tired of talking. But you guys are writing interesting things. All right, I'm going to do that asshole thing again where I just read for a minute. I know that shitty broadcast. And it's not that I don't value your time. It's a combination of just this is me and that I do also wonder if some people are too caught up in constant stimulation. And I think there's nothing wrong with sitting quietly with friends. So, okay, yeah, rather than framing this as me being an asshole and sitting quietly, I'll say I love you all and let's sit quietly together for a moment and read. And thank you, Grizz, very much for the donation. Save the cheerleader. Okay, Shane says, I do worry more about those behind me than the course I'm on. I can appreciate that statement. Okay, awesome. And that's not a criticism of you. That's really fucking beautiful that you see that. I spent so long caught up in it. And the blessing is the Peterson shit. So just let go of all that. Because doesn't that also come with so much pressure to be worried about everyone behind you? Trust that there's this beautiful, magical fucking plan, this play written out, that you are naturally designed to play the part you're meant to play, and that by doing like Peterson says and looking inward, doing the self work, shadow work, develop yourself, and it ties with what like that Christian idea of don't worry about going and telling people how to be a good Christian, be a good Christian, shine a good light unto the world, and in that way show others the beauty of what you've learned from God. Not by explaining it to them, but by fully embracing what you're learning from God. Letting go of outcome, not worried if other people understand you, not looking for external rewards from society for having some sort of connection to spirit or God. Because then you're missing the full fucking beauty of it on its own. Hey, Dan, good to see you. You said, dang, didn't receive a notification that you were live. Great surprise. Yeah, and I noticed the last time I went live, I watched the analytics after, and at first it was like 80% was coming from browse features, and then that suddenly cut off. And I checked, I searched, and for a while, if you search sorting myself out or sorting myself out Lunatic Live, the last one I did didn't show up at all. So it looks like it was being shadow banned for about 12 hours. But then, yeah, I checked yesterday, and like yesterday later in the day, it started getting a few views from browse features again, and it showed up on search. So I think it's possible that because that the algorithms may not like people talking about apocalypse or conspiracy theories or what's going on in the world right now. And so some of my content might get sort of shadow banned because of that for the next while. But still, your best odds of finding out is, if you do, for anyone who misses this and does want to be involved the next time there's a Lunatic Live, the best way to do that is to hit the all notifications. But the other thing is I do intend, and again, no promises. I got some shit going on my own, but I've got a good feeling that I'll be able to come on more often for a while. It does seem like a lot of people are experiencing a lot of chaos and like things upending. Reality's suddenly very different than it was before for a lot of people. A lot of things are changing, are uncertain. And I've noticed I'm one of the rare things very unchanged by this. As I've said so far, the idea of death, of, apocalypse, all of this, I'm depolarized to all of that. But also, unlike a lot of people who used to call themselves hermits or say, I'm totally socially isolated, but then sort of really do go absolutely nowhere for a while and realize how much they were going out every now and then. I don't exaggerate when I call myself a hermit. Like, I have gone out into public once in the past 6 months, like nothing to do with this. So I really stand unchanged by this. This was already the world I lived in, thinking about, like, yeah, I've thought about the apocalypse and death so long that it doesn't even matter to me anymore. And so I thought perhaps that puts me in a position to be helpful to some people at the moment. So if I'm able to, I'm going to try to go live more often. And Ryan and I were speaking earlier today, talking about some other ideas of how we could step up sorting myself out possibly. And Ryan is sort of in a similar position to me in that he's already got a very busy schedule. So that's, and with anyway, yeah. So Ryan also isn't sure yet how much time he'll be able to put into the channel, but we were discussing some things we could do if we both feel up to it. So possibly I'll be coming on more. And if YouTube does suppress my shit, you just check the channel every couple days. Because even when they're suppressing it, it shows up if you click on the channel and click on videos. But I also don't know why YouTube put me back in the search after. Because, I'm not promoting any conspiracies. I'm not promoting fear of death. I'm not promoting panic. The reason so I can understand why YouTube might not like the title, Are We All Gonna Die? They might think that was clickbait for exploiting fear or encouraging it. I put that there because I've seen other people asking this fucking question all over the place. Or if not asking it, they're acting like they're panicked by that idea. And so I put the question out there to be like, yeah, and don't worry, it's fine. It's beautiful. Look for the opportunity in it. Do fucking Peterson shit, or do a lot of meditating and listen to Alan Watts, or make this quality. If you're in quarantine with loved ones, this is a great opportunity to deepen your relationship or to finally face any problems in your family or whatever, and to really learn how to live with each other in a better way. If you're quarantined on your own, this is a chance to really learn how to just be yourself and to be okay on your own. Ah, fuck. Another stop talking moment. Yeah, so I like that joke, Grizz. About Monty Python style, bring out your dead. Also, I'm noticing now, like, it was never planned, but just by out of this is where I like to sit, and that's the picture that happened to be on the wall behind me. I've had a plague doctor behind me the whole time now. That's very, very apt symbolism at the moment. Hi, Adela. Very good to see you. How are you doing? Shane says, I know only that I know nothing. Socrates, yeah, something pretty similar anyway. I'm not emoji literate, so I don't know what you're saying there, Grizz. Yeah, Daniel, the nothing destroys our world. If you look at the never ending story, and that metaphysical nothing, that loss of meaning, is a greater loss than the loss of life. And Gloff says quarantine is a very interesting opportunity. Yes, absolutely. This is like a collective moment for us all to slow down and examine life. And, we were already at the point with technology and everything else, the fuck going on. And the way Alan Moore talks about the period of information doubling, however many thousands of years it took us to invent, the first basic tools. And then how long did it take till we doubled our inventions and knowledge? And how many thousands of years did it take to double? And then it got to where we were doubling every, hundreds of years instead of thousands. And then we're doubling every few years instead of decades. And, it's predicted that at some point we're going to, it's just going to go off exponentially. And Alan Moore says if you look at that information doubling process, look at information as a energetic input. And so to use the analogy of water, that you continue to add heat to water, so you continue to add information to the collective unconscious. For a long time, what you have is water getting gradually warmer and warmer and warmer and warmer. But at a certain point, the amount of that information reaches the tipping point where that causes the water to change states from liquid to gas. And he feels that that's the coming apocalypse, is when we reach the point where society has to dramatically change. And I think what he is picking up on, intuitively and magically, is very similar to if you take elements of what a lot of other people have predicted and where was I going with that? A more integral society. To mix in some Ken Wilber shit about that next way of thinking. So this could all be a part of that. And fate giving us all some time to face the panic, to face our mortality, and then to slow down. And, one thing Socrates did say is an unexamined life is not worth living. And I know people have interpreted different ways, and I'm not even, because I think there's plenty of meaning in that. But to me, part of that meaning is also, because Socrates had the option to get out of being put to death, and he chose instead to stick to his morals. and then to let go of the income of that, or outcome of that, meant he was going to be put to death and fined. And part of the unexamined life is not worth living is without mindfulness, without that connection to soul, and without the ability to live honestly and to examine your own life. It's just, life isn't worth living. And a lot of people, I think, are living in a way that Socrates would say is not worth living. It's a great opportunity for a lot of people to find that. And yes, Shane says quarantine is a great place to grow comfortable in your own skin. Absolutely. Hey, Andrew's here. I don't know how far behind I am. I gotta piss. Are we done, or do I come back? Andrew just got here, or even if he's been here a while, if I'm behind. All right, anyone who feels like waiting, I'm gonna go take a piss and be back, hang out a little while longer. So talk amongst yourselves in the meantime. All right, and so I think I'm going to read quickly and sort of skim through again, not worry about responding to everything. But I do have a question for everyone other than Andrew and Grizz, because I talked to you guys. I know how you're doing. Also, other than Dust to Dust, I know you're here, but we're talking tomorrow. So I don't need to hear that from you now. But if anyone else is watching and wants to let me know how they're doing, is anybody struggling? Is anybody really freaked out by this? And the same way that if I can, I'm going to try to do more content and more at the channel for the next little while. If this is a time where a lot of people are struggling and I can make some sort of positive difference by having conversations with people, either recorded, like if people are interested in talking through some of their issues right now and want to share it with other people, that can be great. Or if people just need to talk one-on-one privately, especially if you know you're really struggling, if you already had mental health issues or anything like that, and this is making it worse. Again, no promises, but I will do my best to be there for people if anyone thinks talking to me would be helpful. And so if anyone else is watching who isn't someone I'm talking to, how are you doing? Or there are other people like me who in the audience that how they're doing is that actually they find they're quite naturally well equipped for this situation and that they're looking to help people. Because if we've got a group of people in the audience that are looking for help right now, and we've got another group of people who are looking to do the healing therapy of helping others. Again, no promises, I don't know, but maybe we could facilitate more connections between people in the community. If everyone's sitting around, it'd be a great time to make friends with each other. Support groups and whatnot work great, even without a facilitator that knows a lot. Just And in fact, any kind of group whatsoever can become therapeutic. If you take like some fucking Star Trek nerds, or people playing Dungeons and Dragons, or people going to a gun range, or Alcoholics Anonymous, any of these things where you take a bunch of people who don't know each other and then just have them spend time with each other until they develop that bit of caring about each other. If you then take a group like that and have a discussion of, is anyone struggling or does anyone need anything? It's amazing how often people can help each other. I wish I remembered the name of the woman or the name of the talk, but I did see a TED talk about that a while ago, where I think she'd been running something like an Alcoholics Anonymous. Again, I forget what the group was, but she said at a certain point she started doing that in meetings where people would bring up just if they had problems. And she said she became amazed that if you take a group of people in a local community, how often we can very easily help each other with things. Like where one person might say, like, actually, yeah, I'm really stressed out. My car broke down and I've got to keep getting to work and I can't afford a cab. And someone else will say, where do you, and they say where they work. And it turns out someone else drives right by there anyway. Or someone says, oh, I'm just had all this damage to my house. A bunch of windows were broken or whatever. And someone else says, hey, actually, I got a bunch of windows that from when we were doing renovations and we got too many. She said it was just amazing. If you can get any group of people like locally to get together on a regular basis, and then you just have conversations about what people need, how often there's people around who have what you're looking for. And especially if it's people who need to talk. If there's a whole bunch of lonely people out there who need to talk, that seems to solve itself. Like, fucking talk to each other. Now would be a great time to meet. And if we can facilitate that through the channel somehow, I would enjoy doing so. And yes, you were quoting Neverending Story. I like that, Gloff. You can't compare yourself to what you think you should be doing, what everyone else is doing, because everyone's locked up in fucking quarantine. Yeah, that's one advantage of isolation, is you can really find out who you are when you're not constantly comparing yourselves to others. And also when no one else is observing what you're doing, so you're not feeling judged about what you do. You spend a week alone where you're not going to talk to anyone. Like, if anyone wants to take this as an opportunity to do a silent retreat, you've heard Sam Harris or whoever talk about going on a silent retreat, and you think, oh, who's got the time to do a silent retreat? Do a silent retreat for a week in your house. Get all the supplies you need for a week. Tell all your love. If you're someone who's quarantined, and if you're someone who's laid off, tell everyone ahead of time, and then turn your fucking phone off. Turn the fucking news off, and do whatever form of silent retreat you want. Like, especially if you're out in nature, you can go hardcore and do nothing but meditate most of the time, or you can allow yourself to only read, and do activities, like exercise and such. Or there's also a form where, like, you don't have to also give up all fucking media and everything. I notice in myself there's a difference between watching movies or television shows or just content. Watching the content I choose to watch. That's like where you think to yourself, like when you put on a CD, when you're picking out of your collection of things. There's something about when we're using social media. And I have another mode. One of the reasons I use YouTube often is because I'm not in that mode of wanting to be really careful about what, I'm taking in mentally. I've got another mode where you add the random element of we let our algorithms choose a lot for us. Sometimes I don't know what fucking movie to watch. So you just go to whatever fucking streaming site and scroll through what's new. That's you opening yourself up to other people making choices. If you're watching YouTube and you're picking anything out of the selected videos, you're being led as to what you think about later. So I do have a mode I sometimes go in where I allow myself to watch TV, movies, and whatnot, but where I'm constantly mindful of what I'm watching, how it's affecting me, and I am always choosing what I'm watching. I'm not going on social media, or that if I go to YouTube, I go to YouTube, use the search feature to watch what I chose to watch, and don't allow myself to be led by something else like an algorithm. And yeah, if you just cut off all communication with people for even a few days, and cut yourself off from social media and from anything where it's choosing for you, and take a couple days of silence. And, you know, if you're going to be watching movies or doing puzzles, or even you can do a silent retreat and work on mindfulness even while playing a whole bunch of video games. Again, if you're not playing interactively with people online. You can learn mindfulness in anything. You can sit and play Pac-Man for hours and learn to observe how your body reacts to playing Pac-Man. Learn to feel, like really feel what it's like to play Pac-Man. You know, the mindfulness, the aware of your breath, the awareness of physical sensation that you normally lose. I don't know. I got started on that. All right, Andrew is filling us in on what life's like in Tonga. I just made it back from shopping. Excellent. People here are not taking the virus seriously. Everyone is standing right beside each other. I saw a group of 4 girls sharing the same bottle of water. Shane says, be like water, my friends. Solid liquid gas. Yeah, learn how to transform. Oh, and Gloff says on the plus side, influenza's down because of all the social distancing. Yeah. And as much as that, I'm not taking away from every individual death is still that tragedy to their loved ones and all of that. We are all precious. I'm not discounting the people who are dying in any way. Just I also feel they're going somewhere better. And like to me, sweet death has come to usher them. I've encountered death. It's lovely. But yeah, aside from that, if you're someone who's sitting and thinking about death and the whole caught up in it and thinking, oh, you know, am I going to die because of this? We also don't know how many lives have been saved by us cutting down on travel, or how many workplace accidents didn't occur. There could be somebody watching right now that if this hadn't happened, they would have died in a car crash yesterday if it had been travel as usual. We're constantly losing people to things, and some of those death rates will be going down right now. I'm pretty sure we're going to have fewer, you know, if quarantine lasts for a while, we're going to have fewer mortalities because some job sites are closed. And if we're all traveling less, we're going to have fewer fatalities because of that. And I'm sure there are plenty of other things that I'm not thinking of where plenty of deaths are being avoided that would have happened otherwise. Oh, okay. Yeah. And Andrew's saying, I meant to ask you this before I went live. So Andrew's working on improving his tarot reading skills. And he's given me a couple card readings recently, but he's like working on stepping up his game. He wants more practice. So he says, hi, for anyone who wants a tarot reading, send me an email, jokumandrew@gmail.com. Yeah, so if anyone's looking for a tarot reading, another great way to take advantage of the current situation is that this quarantine is coinciding with Andrew having the time and inclination to do readings for people. And reading with him might help you find the opportunities within your own crises. All right, so Shane says, doing all right. I was born in the year of the rat, and this is my 4th cycle. So it's Mayan calendar new beginnings for this year, no matter what else is going on in my universe. Well, that has synchronized with a time of great change for the collective unconscious as well. When Daniel says TV's more about passivity, internet more about being active. Yes, it's about choosing what you watch. Yeah, and it's also like there's plenty to learn from fiction. Some people think that, if I'm going to be productive and I feel like watching or reading something, that the thing to do is to, read maps of meaning or watch a documentary or some sort of lecture. But we can learn plenty from fiction. First of all, there's mental skills aside from like understanding facts. The ability to empathize with others goes up dramatically. Our emotional intelligence and things like that when we read fiction. It allows us to better understand people very different from ourselves. And then also there's an opportunity, because when people look to things like tarot cards or astrology as ways of finding out about themselves, let's all admit that we all have a narcissistic aspect to ourselves. We're all fascinated by ourselves. That's why we're drawn to those things, to learn about ourselves. Life itself is constantly offering that. And like Peterson says, your impulse of where your attention goes, that is not something you choose. It's something you have and you discover and you can pay attention to. And with us all being expressions of the infinite source, you can look at that as communication from God. Just where your interest goes. But also, I just slipped on who it was talking about it. When you watch a movie or something, that's like getting a tarot reading if you're mindful. So if you're watching some movie and suddenly you're filled with emotion and you really look up to some character, or you watch a movie and you just fucking love that character, like you want a poster of that character, you want a t-shirt of them, that's like a tarot reading. That's the universe telling you something. If you're highly drawn to some symbol, like me, you want Silver Surfer t-shirt. I realize that's because the things the Silver Surfer symbolized to me were things I needed to take on as a part of myself. And I mean, I didn't think of it when I put the t-shirt on, obviously. This is a coincidence, but Silver Surfer is an example of accepting apocalypse. Although he accepted it in a different way. Galactus came to Zenlaw, is that? No, I forget. But anyway, Nornrad, that fear of his world being destroyed, offered his life to save his planet. And yes, he averted the actual apocalypse. Galactus didn't destroy the planet. But archetypically, the Silver Surfer then took that on himself. That world still ended for the Silver Surfer. When he gave himself over to Galactus, everything about his home planet that he loved was lost to him. And so he took the apocalypse on himself and eventually became a much more enlightened being, far more depolarized to those things. All right, and so if you're mindful, when you're watching movies, you can examine what it is you're drawn to, or you can examine what it is you're disgusted by, or whatever brings up strong emotions. That can really lead you to a lot of shedding light on areas inside that are dark to your own consciousness. Daniel says fiction express things about life. It's about meanings, feelings, emotions, questioning. Yeah, absolutely. And Shane says dogma is meaningless except for when it's teaching you about yourself. Yes, or when you find that enacting a certain dogma gets you the end result you want. So, yeah, if you're mindful about it, and if you realize that by repeating a certain mantra or taking on a certain dogma, if what you realize is that you don't get caught up in it where you think, okay, my ideology is absolutely objectively correct, like I'm actually correct about everything. so I'll lock into this ideology. Like that obviously is very difficult. But if instead you remain mindful and even like you can learn to inhabit different ideologies to understand their own limited perspective. And then you can choose to go into that mindset to act as if an ideology is true for a certain set of time to achieve a goal. Hey, Longstone, good to see you. I don't know how to explain that better. I feel I explained that very, very poorly. So how you doing, Longstone? Has everything shutting down in Ontario affected you much? Dust to Dust says, I have no problem with dogma. I wouldn't say it's useless. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's like that with fucking everything. There is not a single science, ideology, spiritual teaching that cannot be used as either a poison or a medicine. Anything can be used to evil ends and can take you away from God, taken to an extreme and used the wrong way. But also, those opposite ends of the polarity can be medicines for each other. Everything, on a deep level, I feel everything does have a purpose and fit together. When balanced, used or when used for its actual purpose. Longstone says you were a hermit to begin with. Yeah, so it hasn't affected us much. And Shane says idols. These are things of dogma. Again, yes, like absolutely. But on the other hand, an idol can help you. I do magic and rituals and focusing on an idol, which, and again, it's like you don't want to take the golden calf and put it in place of the one true God, but to take a limited subset of God, like with the Hindu variety of gods, to take one aspect of the greater truth and to idolize it mindfully with a purpose to dive deeply into that aspect of the greater God. I think that can be rewarding. But again, I think it's very dangerous. That's very different from thinking that your idol is God and everyone else's is wrong. It's you can see the place for idols, for archetypes, for ideologies. Longstone says dogma's dead. Doctrine can be a living document. Yes. Well, again, dead things can be useful. And I'm tired of talking. I'm caught up. Does anyone else have... Yeah, I don't know. I'm tired of talking. Does anyone else have anything they want said? I'll just read something without worrying about responding to it. So Shane says God is dead. Dogma is dead. All right, yeah, I'm not in any hurry to disappear, but I am really fucking tired of thinking for things to say. So I'm just gonna sit. Yes, Dust to Dust. We're still on for tomorrow. We'll hook up. I'll shoot you a link tomorrow before 5. We'll hook up on Zoom and we can either just talk privately or we could record it or we could do a mix if you want. Like if you want to talk about some private things for a while and then have a discussion to post on the channel, we can do that. But yeah, I'll shoot you a link in Discord. And so I'm going to sit quietly for a minute, and anyone who, this is your opportunity to have to speak to the audience. I won't worry about responding. Grizz says, if the woodchuck in the prairie went to mass with an ass, what's the price of tea in Italy? Okay, and I said I wouldn't respond, but others are free to answer that for him. Shane says I was quoting Nietzsche. I don't believe it myself. Ah, gotcha. All right, seems like everyone's done. And Grizz says, join our super secret Discord. Yeah, absolutely. So do you have a link you can post, Grizz? And yeah, possibly, like I said earlier, me and Ryan were talking about some ways we could try to step up sorting myself out. And some of that may involve some, like some things other than doing videos. And so if we're going to be doing watch parties or anything, and you're definitely interested in that, join the Discord. Shane says, I get knocked down, but I get up again. And I'll finish with, for if there's anyone watching this later, anyone who's not live at the moment who actually watches this whole fucking thing, and you've gotten to this point. Oh, right. If you have something you want to say, if there's something you wish you'd been here live so you could have asked something about something I've said, leave a comment below the video. And I don't know what I'll do. The last video or two I did, I actually started answering comments. But I'll do one of two things. If people ask shit in the comments below, I will either respond in the comments below, or I will go on live again sometime and respond to them live. So anyone who missed this, watched the whole thing and wanted to say something or ask a question, comment below and I'll get back to it in some way. And Dust to Dust says, fear and wisdom have a strange relationship. Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a perfectly fine note to end on. So, everyone live now and everyone watching this later, God bless. I wish you all the best. Like, rather even than saying, I hope you're okay in these hard times, I will say, I hope you're seizing the wonderful opportunities for unexpected gifts to arise from unusual times. So I hope everyone's maximally benefiting from this time. Hopefully I'll be on again soon. So Lunatic love to all.